Michelle Prince, founder and CEO of Performance Publishing Group, making a difference one story at a time. We'll be shining the light on successful founders, entrepreneurs, business owners, and leaders that are getting results and making a difference. We'll talk about how they built their businesses, are creating movements, and leveraging the power of authority in their own lives. Be sure to stick around to the end of the show, and we'll reveal how you can be our next guest. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Power of Authority Spotlight, where we shine the light on entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, founders, people that are just doing really awesome things. They're making a difference. They're building businesses and they're changing lives. And I'm excited to have our guest today because he and I connected a couple years ago. I was on his podcast and now he's on mine. And I'll tell you a little bit about Tim in just a second. First, this episode is brought to you by Performance Publishing. Performance Publishing helps people to become published authors. If you've ever thought about writing a book, and especially if you're a business owner, you need to have a business card, and that is your book. Grab a free strategy call with one of the publishing experts at Performance Publishing. Just go to performancepublishinggroup.com. That's performancepublishinggroup.com. Let me tell you about my friend, Tim Winders. Tim Winders is an executive coach, author, and host of Seek, Go, Create, a podcast and YouTube interview show. He has worked in the areas of leadership, business, and ministry for almost 40 years. Tim was the guy that looked like he had it all, the big house and the country club resort, 2 businesses valued at over $1 million each, plus over $15 million in real estate. But in 2008, the real estate markets crashed, and a slow and painful erosion of his companies. He and his wife were bankrupt and homeless, living out of their Honda van by 2013. Fast forward to today, Tim and his wife are still homeless, but they consider themselves essential nomads. They live, travel, and work in their 39-foot motorhome while enjoying the best locations North America has to offer. Through his journey, he's convinced that we must redefine success in order to live out our best life. This topic is what he has explored with his guests on the Seek, Go, Create podcast since 2019. His inspirational novel titled Coach, A Story of Success Redefined, released in May of 2022. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Michelle. Am I the first guest you've had that's in an RV?
Actually, yes, I think so. Maybe second, but yours, I think you're officially the first. Somebody might have been on vacation one time. You're living in an RV. So how is RV life?
You know what? It's like anything else. Right before you push record, we actually had a little rainstorm here in Arizona, and there's some lightning in the background. I hope it's not picking up, but that's not awesome. But you know what? My wife and I just celebrated our 5-year anniversary of living this type lifestyle. And like anything else, there are some really, really cool things and a few drawbacks, but it's mostly cool. Mostly really, really cool.
I love that. I actually have a friend, Jim Palmer. He did something similar with, he ended up moving to a boat and he called it his floating home. Now they're in an RV, and we said this a little before we started. I mean, there's a little bit of FOMO in this because of it sounds really cool. It sounds really fun. But then there's other drawbacks, like you said. So
yeah, I mean, we're homeless, literally. I mean, people say, "Oh, what's that like?" Well, we don't have a home. People say, "Well, where's your home base?" I go, "We don't have one. This 39-foot motor coach that we've named Theopolis is where we hang out, and so almost all of our possessions are here. We've got a few in another spot, and this is where my wife and I hang out. We wintered down in southern Arizona, so we didn't really experience a winter. And we're near Sedona right now as we work our way north. We'll visit grandchildren in Colorado on our way to South Dakota and Wyoming and Montana, where we'll probably spend most of the summer. And, we may cycle down again, but I was joking with you earlier. I said, it's kind of odd when you don't experience winter. Your body doesn't quite know what to do. I keep expecting it to get colder, but it won't for us. So, it's just part of that redefining what is normal and what does success mean to us. And, even at the mature age that I'm at, we still like kind of pushing and seeing what we could do.
For sure. Walk me through how it came to the motorhome, because you obviously had a huge crash in 2008. And I know this might be painful, but I think it's relevant because so many people, business owners, right? We have our ups and we have our downs in business. But what made you, rather than stay in the quote unquote normalcy of a home and a country club and all those things and try to build back up, what made you decide to shift, pivot, and go a totally different direction?
Yeah, maybe it's an embracing the different, the doing something different than what society, because I tried most of my life to do what society says you should do to be successful. I mean, I was go, go, go. I was a hard charger, fairly confident, cocky, arrogant, depending on your viewpoint in the way I communicated all the way up to '08. And I saw recently, I think that you had gone to the Masters. We lived about an hour down the road in a golf course community with 117 holes and 6,000 square foot house, all that kind of stuff. I mean, so, mid to late 40s, thought I was almost retired, everything. Well, all of that changed. And it does sound painful, but I want to say this before I mention a few other things. My wife and I discuss this all the time. We would not wish our journey on anyone, but we are so thankful that we went through it because of who we are, where we are now, and what we're doing. We would have never done what we are doing now. When we first launched, when we first lost our big home, bankruptcy, all that kind of stuff, got rid of all the things, told both our kids who were grown, but not quite, like right out of high school, still sort of right out of college. We said, listen, there's no home to come to anymore. We're out. We're in the Honda van with stuff loaded up. So we just started traveling, didn't have any financial resources. Family helped us out some. We had a few things that popped up along the way, Michelle, but we were just kind of going on a journey. And most of it, now looking back, was a spiritual journey of us just finding out who we were, what we're here for, what our purpose is, things like that. I'm actually still trying to figure that out too, by the way. But it was just gradual. We did house sitting for a while, went to Australia, New Zealand, because our daughter was over there as an au pair, and then ended up in Bible school. And when we were finishing up Bible school, we really had a lot of financial resources, revenue that was coming into us. And we probably at that point had the financial resources. Truthfully, we probably had more access to financial resources then than we did back in '08, but we won't get into all of that. It didn't look like we did just from the outside looking in. But Michelle, my wife, was praying. She was in the shower. She kind of spent a day or so thinking about this. And she came out. She says, Tim, I think the Lord wants us to travel again when we were finishing up the Bible school experience. And I think he wants us to get an RV. And Michelle, the joke in the family was that I couldn't spell RV. I didn't camp growing up. It's not like, I grew up in Atlanta, city boy, went to Georgia Tech, downtown Atlanta. She went to University of Georgia. So it's not like we were, the rugged outdoor adventure type. And, as a husband, this is good marriage tip right here. I did the wise thing instead of responding in the way I wanted to. Maybe this shows wisdom. I didn't say anything for a couple days.
Mm.
I just let her words marinate. And, a month later, we had bought our Theo that we live in now here, that if you're watching the video, you can see, and gutted it. And so about 5 years ago, we moved in and we've been traveling all over North America
Mm.
since. Did I fill in the gaps enough?
Oh,
There's a lot to that, but that gives you a little bit.
yeah, no, and I love that because it's, and you said something about going through. One of my friends wrote a book called A Place Called Through, Jackie Listen, and it's all about that it's in the through that a lot of times we don't see it at the moment, but those are the the pivotal moments that shape who you are, and clearly you're on the other end of that. But if I may ask a vulnerable question, was it scary during that period where you're just like, wow, I just lost everything. What do I do? I mean, or were you optimistic from day one?
Eh, Generally, I'm an optimistic person. And this is probably my most vulnerable statement. I'm not sure that I'm one that would admit that I was afraid, even if I were. But fear, to be to be homeless, to be, with my wife, my beautiful wife. Thank goodness she stuck with me. We've now celebrated our 35th year together. And she,
Wow.
a lot of the trials we went through would definitely erode even the strongest of relationships. But, there were times that we weren't sure where we might stay one night, and that was very unsettling. Uh, uh, Fearful, yes. Scary, yes. The thing that I think is the most difficult for a personality like mine is feeling out of control,
Mhm.
is not having a control of a place to go, a touch point. And listen, at 40 something years old, I probably could have moved back into my parents' basement. That, but I kind of didn't want to do that. And so there were options, but when you don't feel like there are many options, and eh, when you get broken to a point where the only thing you can do is hit your knees
Mhm.
and look up, Michelle, I think that's the place where God says, okay, now I've got Tim's attention. Now we can do some things together. Now I can work on him in a way that, and I was a believer all along. I mean, I came to know Jesus Christ, and was a follower of Christ, all the way going back to 1990. But had I made him Lord over my life? No, not until I didn't know where I was going to sleep one night with my wife, until I, wasn't sure where the next meal might come from. And we never went hungry. We always had a place. It's not
Yeah.
that distraughtful. But anyway, did that answer? Was that, I don't even know if I know what vulnerable means, but
You know what, though? I appreciate you being vulnerable because I think somebody doesn't have to move into a van to have gone through the same type of, unsettling is the word you use, right? And look, everyone's crash is looks a little different. It might be a real estate crash. It might be losing a spouse. It may be, losing a business or whatever it is. But I think that's just is just a real conversation. It's not necessarily what happens to you, it's what you do with it. And what I love about what you all have done, you and your wife, is you've redefined it. Right? It's not necessarily what we think it has to be. So let's talk about that because you even wrote a novel about it. So what does redefined success really look like for the rest of us who don't have a van? How's that? Or a
well,
motorhome?
it kind of goes along with what you just said and what we were talking about right before we push record. It's really just asking questions. Is this what I'm here for? Is this, I don't want to say all there is, because I love the Apostle Paul. He says, I can abound, I can abase, I can live with a lot, I can live with little. And I think we all have seasons that might be the case.
Mm,
But I think what it really means for me at this stage is is basically saying, what is success and what is my success? Not, I'm gonna dig a little bit at you, not looking at Michelle and her husband and they're at the Masters a couple of weeks ago and going, oh my gosh, I am so jealous. She's at the most incredible sporting event that exists. And the people that describe Augusta National say it's like walking, this is a little bit sacrilegious, like walking on hallowed ground and all of that. It's, see, success for many people is, oh, I need to be doing exactly what Michelle is doing. And that's not the case. I need to be doing what God wants Tim to be doing. And so for me, that's what redefining success is. For someone who may not have that spiritual foundation, I think it's just asking, it's like, what? Am I living my success? Am I living what I'm created for, what I'm put here for right now in this season? Because I think sometimes people think it's, a lifetime thing, or if we want to use a spiritual term, a calling. I don't use that word much, by the way. I use words like assignment.
mm,
And so I really think it is just kind of asking questions. Now, here's the reason I think it's important, because I think there's two ways that people can come to the realization of what it might be for them. Number one, you could ask questions, maybe get a coach, maybe get some training in all that you do and work with people like what we do and make a concerted effort to change. Or you can get the proverbial 2x4 to the head in 2008 and end up homeless and bankrupt and change because a catalytic event occurred and you brought up a health challenge or something like that someone can happen. So I do think it's better to do it on your own terms than to have it forced upon you by whatever's going on in the world, right?
I love that though. What is my success? Because we do compare. And first of all, I have to bring and mention the master. So that was incredible. I have to say, I felt guilty having a ticket though, because I knew going into it, wouldn't have appreciated it as much as like, I know people have been wanting to go there for decades and decades and decades. And one of my husband and I's best friends happened to have 2 tickets and we could go with them. But once I got there, it was like being at Disneyland. Like I was like, okay, I think I kind of like this. I want to go again. Which who doesn't? But all that to say, that's not an everyday occurrence for the Prince family, but it was pretty amazing.
You do not have to apologize for that. You owned it. I could tell. And I was not jealous. I was inspired and applauding you. So, anyway, good. I hope you got a pimento cheese sandwich.
I tried it, didn't like it, but I did love their chicken salad sandwich. But the point is, and I think it's so valid when we redefine success, and especially I think this generation, our generation now, like you think back to when we were younger, we didn't have social media. I mean, the biggest part of comparing was running into somebody or seeing them at school or I don't, the only equivalent I can think of is back in the day when you had party lines. You got a lot of people on the phone, but now we are bombarded with what everybody else is doing all the time, and it is sometimes hard to not be like, oh wow, as a speaker, wow, that she's out there speaking everywhere, and or wow, they did another book, and but that's not necessarily our success, and we're all created differently, right? We all have our own unique gifts, our own unique strengths, and I think going back to the clarity of success is so 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 important, but not just success, but your success. I love that. Interesting. Talk about, and you do a lot of executive coaching and you work with leaders and all that. What are some of the themes that you're hearing? What are the things that you are continuously helping leaders with?
I think one of the biggest things, I mean, the foundation of what we just brought up is a topic that I think can't be spoken enough about. And that's just the
Mm.
comparison game, because the byproduct of that is when we try to become something that we're not, which is to me the opposite of authority. If we're talking about the power of authority, the opposite of authority is hypocrisy to me. And
Mm.
hypocrisy is when someone decides that they see something that they should be, and so they go down that path. There's I could preach sermons on that if we wanted to, but we don't want to do that here. So that's one. But there's a root that I'm finding in our current culture that you brought up, our maturity. We'll use that word maturity, that has accelerated at such a rate over the course of our lifetime. Because one of the things we've seen multiple things occur. I know you're not as old as me, but I remember 3 channels on the television.
Mhm.
I remember when 24/7 news started. I remember I was in Atlanta. I remember Ted Turner and all, oh, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. I remember when cable channels started coming along. I remember the internet, which was super cool and we loved it, and cell phones, and now we're connected to everyone. And then I remember smartphones. And of course, I remember social media. All of those things have thrown so much gasoline on the fire of something that we had, and we don't really understand how awesome it was. And that is quiet.
Ooh.
There is so little quiet and peace
Mhm.
and nothing going on right now. And I know it's somewhat ironic that we're bringing it up, that someone's listening in on the podcast or watching on YouTube or something like that. So there's a bit of irony there, and I'm not going to just let that go. But the thing that I attempt to work on, and it's kind of hard to put this on a business card, but Michelle, the thing that I believe I need more of, you need more of, anyone listening needs more of, is some peaceful, quiet time of solitude. Because this is what my belief is. In those quiet times, depending on what you do, if you journal, if you pray, if you meditate, if you just sit there and do nothing,
Mm,
I believe that's where God will meet you
mm.
and let you know what you're here for.
Wow.
And I believe executives are that way too. And so the thing that I try to do the most with executives is create some white space, clear things out so that they've got some time to be still. And this has come up on our podcast so much recently,
Mm,
to be instead of do.
mhm, mm.
Practice being instead of doing. So that's a big one for me.
Wow. Oh my gosh, so many things to unpack there because couldn't agree more. And truly, and I just I love how God works actually because there's no coincidence in my life. And literally just this morning, I was reading it at something and brought my attention to a verse. And it's in the Passion Translation, but I just have to read it because it's almost identical to what you just said. It says, "Arise, my love, my beautiful companion, and run with me to the higher place. For now is the time to arise and come away with me." Song of Songs. And what I read in that was that exact thing. Come away with me. Get away from the noise. Get away from what you think is making you successful maybe and just be so I love that and in fact just next week I'm doing a writing retreat and that's kind of how it's first started was just get away because sometimes when you have no agenda other than I'm a journaler so no agenda other than just to put the pen and just see what happens and sometimes I'll just write and not even know what I'm writing um, it's amazing the clarity that can come out of that, but how easy it is to just not make time for it.
I
Wow.
think there's so many things that are working against us.
Mhm.
And I mean, if we were, hyper spiritual, we would say, oh, it's, the enemy or whatever. I'm not that overly, analytical about that because I know that October of last year, I was approaching 60 years old. And so I wanted to do a few tests. I like to do things just to see what my body does. And I decided at that time that I was going to, in the month of October, cut out alcohol. I don't drink a good bit, but I love a sip of wine and I love a sip of whiskey. Okay. Don't judge me. I know some people are, they've got their rocks and they're about to stone me. Don't do that. Just,
I like
don't
wine, so
judge.
I'm not judging.
Anyway, and the other thing I did, Michelle, is I cut out all of the consumption of information specifically related to news. I had four on various ends of the political spectrum, and I felt in my role I needed to know what was going on, et cetera, et cetera. I decided to cut that out and cut out alcohol and just see what happened. Well, here's what I found out. Within just a few days or a week, I did find out that I had an addiction.
Mm,
The addiction wasn't to alcohol. The addiction was to information. I
wow.
was addicted to information, and I felt as if I needed to constantly be consuming information. And what it was doing, it was clouding my head, clouding my mind, making me angry about certain things that I can't really do much about. It was probably causing me to judge and get upset at certain groups of people based on which side of whatever I read. It doesn't matter which side and all of that. So as November rolled along, which is my birthday month, as November rolled along, I decided, what, I'll have a sip of wine again and maybe a sip of whiskey, but I'm not going back to that information. And so I have all of my emails that were rolled up into this app, and so I get 5 to 10 emails a day now. Period. If you were to send me one personally, I would get it, but if it's like a subscribe or anything, it goes away. And truthfully, I don't go read them much. And I used to feel like I had to read them all. I felt like I had to get them all. And I think that many people are addicted to information. And I know there's so many ways to get it. Like right now, my camera is actually my phone. But if I had my phone in my hand and I had a spare moment and I opened up one of the apps, and y'all know what some of the apps are. They're Instagram. There could even be LinkedIn now. It could be Facebook, TikTok, or whatever. I could spend 20, 30 minutes doing nothing but just consuming whatever is there. And that to me is our biggest challenge
Yeah.
right
Well,
now.
it's not benefiting us. It's not bringing us closer to our goals. And I always suggest to, or at least even for myself, how I feel before I get on the app and then how I feel after. Because sometimes, I mean, it's not doing things for you that's positive, really. I mean, it is nice to see what cousins and friends and all that are doing, but at the same time, it's like there's too much other stuff in there. So I love that. And being addicted to information, I mean, you're not alone. And think about it. If the Google does not exist for no reason, it's because everyone is seeking information. And that while that's great, now there's so much that it's almost like it's overwhelming and it's exhausting. And so even more reason why identifying your real what's success to you, but you can't do that until you get quiet, you know? Oh, I love that. Well, my gosh, I could talk to you all day about so many different things, but we do have to wrap it up. And I do want to ask you because you brought up authority and the show being called "The Power of Authority." It's authority to me is not being better or ahead of somebody. It's really just the ability to have influence. To people want to hear what you have to say because you've done something to build that authority, right? But authority can come in a lot of different ways. It can come through podcasting, it can come through books, speaking, coaching, you name it. But what are you finding today? Probably different than it was a couple of years ago, but what are you finding that's working today in such a overwhelming, loud world we live in of social media to really stand out and still be able to influence people for good? What's working?
The cool thing, Michelle, is that it relates, and I love how the way the conversation is unfolded here. It's really been a building of what we've been talking about here. And we could throw out a lot of words here: genuineness, authenticity. It For the longest during COVID, I don't I'm not a great meditator
Mhm.
or a quieter, but I'm trying. And so one of the things I would do is I would listen to the Sermon on the Mount every morning. And this is a great tip. This might be the best thing that some people get from this whole conversation. The Sermon on the Mount is in Matthew, 5, 6, and 7.
Mhm.
And it's Jesus. It's all red. Okay. It's Jesus, and it's one of the best overviews of the teaching of Jesus. And we believe it was all in one, but it could have, Matthew may have combined some things there. But if you actually put it on an app or something like that where it reads it to you, and you could do it in, a voice that you think sounds like Jesus if you want to, or it could be a female voice and all, which would be fine too. It's 15 minutes long.
Mm.
It's the perfect break to get your mind slowed down and to
Mm.
be quiet and still. So anyway, this is the point of the story, is that if you listen to that over and over again, first of all, it's just extremely nourishing. But at the very end of it, it's the only thing that's not red letters. It says that the crowds were amazed at what they heard because he was one who spoke with authority, not like their scribes.
Mm.
And to me, this whole conversation, what your mission is, authority, it all comes together in almost that one scripture. And it is Jesus was who he was, and the scribes were not, because they were hypocrites. They said one thing and they did another. And so authority to me means, it's this old saying, you're not a hypocrite. You do whatever comes out of your mouth is something you do. You're not making stuff up. You're not trying to prove stuff to other people. You're not saying stuff because you think it's what people want to hear. I just defined our entire political system. It is rooted in who you are. And a lot of it comes from, quiet time and maybe going through some stuff in life and things like that. And my desire, my hope, my hopefully is passion right now is to be that way, whether it's speaking to one person or 10 or 100,000. That would be what I would say authority is for me.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think you just hit the nail right on the head. It is. It's just being who you are. It's being authentically you in your own skin and unapologetically in your own skin, with no worry of what anyone says, because you can't change who you are, you know? Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a great interview. And I mean, I took lots of different notes, but I think ultimately it does kind of, boil down to, who are you? What has God created you to do? What does that look like for you, not compared to anyone else? And, taking action on doing it, which is exactly what you and your wife have done, which is exciting. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Tim. So appreciate you.
Thank you, Michelle. I've enjoyed the conversation. I love having conversations with you.
Same here. All right, everybody, that is it for the show. And my gosh, what a great message and what a great reminder that, and especially with the show being called The Power of Authority. And anyone who knows me knows authority to me is not being better or in charge or, smarter than anyone else. It's literally just, and the way Tim said it, it's just being who you are and owning it. So I encourage you all, go out there, own it, be an authority in somebody else's life and shine your light. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening to the Power of Authority Spotlight. If you are a successful founder, entrepreneur, business owner, or leader that's getting results and making a difference, and you'd like to be on this program, please visit performancepublishinggroup.com/podcast to apply. That's performancepublishinggroup.com/podcast. Also, if you got something out of this interview, please share this episode. Just do a quick screenshot with your phone and text it to a friend or post it on the socials. If you know someone that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show and include the hashtag #ThePowerOfAuthoritySpotlight. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content, so make sure you don't miss any episodes by subscribing. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. Want to know more? Go to our websites, performancepublishinggroup.com or michelleprince.com, and follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.